Hello, YouTube. I've been reading through the books of Samuel recently, and I've come across some fairly explicit examples of objects being used by the Israelites for purposes of divination. And the creation of these objects is actually described in Exodus chapter 28, which has instructions regarding the creation of priestly vestments. Now, I'll read verses 4 and 30, which describe the creation of these specific objects. These are the vestments that they shall make: a breastpiece, an ephod, a robe, a checkered tunic, a turban, and a sash. The important object from there is the ephod. And verse 30 says, "In the breastpiece of judgment you shall put the Urim and the Thummim, and they shall be on Aaron's heart when he goes in before the Lord. Thus Aaron shall bear the judgment of the Israelites on his heart before the Lord continually." Now, I find it interesting that the specifics of the Urim and Thummim are not described in the chapter in Exodus. It must have been something that they were already familiar with. And the most descriptive example of what they were used for shows up in 1 Samuel chapter 14. Now, I do find it interesting here that the breastpiece and the Urim and Thummim are supposed to be on Aaron's heart when he goes in before the Lord, because the scenario in 1 Samuel is quite different. I'm going to read verses 2 and 3, which provides some context for verses 36 through 42. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree that is at Migron. The troops that were with him were about 600 men, along with Ahijah son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord in Shiloh, carrying an ephod. Now the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. Saul said, "Let us go down after the Philistines by night and despoil them until the morning light. Let us not leave one of them." They said, "Do whatever seems good to you." But the priest said, "Let us draw near to God here." So Saul inquired of God, "Shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hand of Israel?" But he did not answer him that day. Saul said, "Come here, all you leaders of the people, and let us find out how this sin has arisen today." So he assumed that it was sin was the reason that he didn't receive an answer from God. "For as the Lord lives, who saves Israel, even if it is in my son Jonathan, he shall surely die." But there was no one among all the people who answered him. He said to all Israel, "You shall be on one side, and I and my son Jonathan will be on the other side." The people said to Saul, "Do what seems good to you." Then Saul said, "O Lord God of Israel, why have you not answered your servant today? If this guilt is in me or in my son Jonathan, O Lord God of Israel, give Urim. But if this guilt is in your people Israel, give Thummim." And Jonathan and Israel were indicated by the lot, but the people were cleared. Then Saul said, "Cast the lot between me and my son Jonathan." And Jonathan was taken. So it seems like the Urim and Thummim are two specific objects which are being used to give either or answers. It was either the other people or Saul and Jonathan, and then either Saul or Jonathan. There's another example of the Urim mentioned in 1 Samuel chapter 28. Now Samuel had died, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. Saul had expelled the mediums and wizards from the land. The Philistines assembled and came and encamped at Shunem. Saul gathered all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. When Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him. not by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. See, the Spirit of the Lord had left Saul at that time. Now, there are examples in 1 Samuel of the ephod being used as an object of divination rather than the Urim and Thummim. So they may be used in connection with one another, but that's not made explicit in these examples. This is from 1 Samuel 23, 9 through 11. When David learned that Saul was plotting evil against him, he said to the priest Abiathar, "Bring the ephod here." David said, "O Lord, the God of Israel, your servant has heard that Saul seeks to come to Keilah to destroy the city on my account. And now will Saul come down as your servant has heard? O Lord, the God of Israel, I beseech you, tell your servant." The Lord said, "He will come down." So it seems that the ephod was in the possession of the priest, but David was allowed to use the ephod himself. And also, the language used in this passage, it seems to indicate that it's the ephod itself that's being used to conjure a yes or no answer on God's part. Now I have another example in 1 Samuel 30 verses 7 through 8 of David doing the same thing. David said to the priest Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, "Bring me the ephod." So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I pursue this band? Shall I overtake them?" He answered, "Pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall surely rescue." So David is attempting to make a decision, and he needs a yes or no answer. And he acquires that through the use of the ephod. Now, there are a couple examples of David doing the same thing in the book of 2 Samuel, but they only refer to David inquiring of the Lord. So I'll link to those. They're in 2 Samuel chapter 2 and also chapter 5. But the ephod and Urim and Thummim are not mentioned specifically. So it seems that the phrase inquired of the Lord is actually a kind of shorthand to indicate that these devices are being used. So anytime you read that in the Old Testament, that's probably what it's referring to, that they're using these specific objects in order to obtain an answer regarding decisions that they need to make. And it's interesting that after the death of David, uses of this and this phraseology seem to disappear. Now, the thing that I found interesting about the specific use of these objects was that I had assumed that such practices were forbidden by the law of Moses. Deuteronomy 18:10 and 11 says, "No one shall be found among you who makes his son or daughter pass through fire, or who practices divination, or is a soothsayer, or an augur, or a sorcerer, or one who casts spells, or who consults ghosts or spirits, or who seeks oracles from the dead." And also Leviticus 19:26 says, "Ye shall not eat anything with its blood. Ye shall not practice augury or witchcraft." Well, it seems to me that that's precisely what was being done in the use of these objects in order to conjure or provoke a specific action on their deity's behalf. So it seems that these prohibitions in the Mosaic Law were not regarding the practices in particular, but rather the deity to whom the practices were being performed.